Hello and welcome to the dashboard course by Trump Excel. I'm Sumit Bansal, and in this video I will show you how to create a call center performance dashboard in Excel. Let me first show you what I mean by a call center performance dashboard. Here I have a fully functional call center performance dashboard, and you would see that there are many elements in this dashboard. If I show you the data that I've used to create this is daily records data, and I have 5,000 rows of data, and you would see that these are daily records with the timing, the agent, department, and so on. So in this dashboard, what I've done is weekly analysis of that data. So I have that data for 3 months, and I have done this analysis for 12 weeks. If you change the week number in this dashboard from this scroll bar at the top left, you would see that all the numbers would update for this week. So if I make it week 2, then these are all the numbers for week 2. Here at the top, I have key call center KPIs that are tracked by call centers to measure their performance. Here I have total number of calls received by that call center in this week, the average answer speed in seconds, which means that it took them on an average 54.7 seconds to answer a call, the abandon rate, which means that 17.4% calls were not answered out of these 368 calls, and average calls per minute. Now I also have agent level details here. I have the total number of calls, calls answered, average speed of call, and call resolution, along with the call resolution trend. Now if I click here, because this is where I can sort this data, so if I want to see which agent had maximum number of calls, I would click here and it would tell me Jim had the maximum number of calls. But if I want to see what is the minimum average speed of answer by these agents, then here Stewart gets the prize because he has 58.2 seconds it takes him to answer the call. So these three parameters, which is total calls, calls answered, and call resolution, are sorted in a descending order with the highest value at the top, but average speed of answer is sorted in a descending order because that is what is required. I also have call abandon rate by department here. So this is an appliance call center, and it has 4 departments, which is washing machine, toaster, fridge, air conditioner, and television. And here I have the call abandon rate by department, and we can see in week 2 in air conditioner there was a high abandon rate, which is higher than the 20% fixed by the client. So if I change this, you would see that these would change in week 3. Even in washing machine and fridge we had higher abandon rate as compared to the previous week. So these would get highlighted separately. Below here I have the overall satisfaction score for the week. So every call is tracked and a satisfaction score is recorded, and in this week the satisfaction score was 3.52. If I change this satisfaction score changes based on the values for that week. I also have the satisfaction score by agent. So in this case, if you look at it, the target was 3.5, and 3 agents, Dan, Martha, and Greg, could exceed the target, but none of the other agents met their targets. And you can see that there is this smiley in front of those agents who would meet the target. So if I change this, you would see that this would also change. And finally, I have the SLA limits, or the service level agreement limits, that are set by the client, and they are agreed upon by the call center. So these are the calls answered in less than 180 seconds. There are 34.7% calls which were answered in less than 180 seconds, and then there are calls with satisfaction score less than 3, which are these calls. I think the color coding should be different because this is a good thing here. These many calls are answered in less than 180 seconds, which is desirable, and this is not desirable because this is satisfaction score of less than 3. So this is how you can read this dashboard, and there are 2 interactive controls here where you can change the week number and you can sort the data. Now let's see how we can create this dashboard from scratch. Here I have the data that I have used to create this dashboard. First I have the call ID, I have the date, and here if you would notice that it starts from 1st January 2015 and it goes up to 31st March 2015. In total I have 5,000 records. I have also captured the timing here, and these timings for each day vary from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., which means that every day this call center is open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and it's open 7 days a week. I have the agent name here, the department, so this is an appliance call center. We have a washing machine, air conditioner, toaster, fridge and television. Here it's captured whether the call was answered or not, and then we have whether the call was resolved or not. Then there is speed of answer in seconds, so the first call took 109 seconds to get answered, and here I have recorded those. There is average talk duration for each call, and then finally we have a satisfaction rating out of 5. Now the first thing that I would do with this data is I would convert this data into an Excel table. So I would press Ctrl T. You can click anywhere in this data set and press Ctrl T. Excel would guess the range that needs to be converted into a table. In this case it guesses it as A1 to I5001, which is the correct range, and it would be the correct one in most of the cases, but just as a precaution it's a good idea to check whether this is the right one or not, because in case there are gaps in rows or columns, then this might not be the right range. And in this case my table has headers, so I would keep this option checked. Now I would click OK, and as soon as I do this, this Excel data set has been converted into an Excel table. You can see that now there are banded rows and now there are filters. One more thing that I would do with this data set is I would include another column where I would check the date, and I would use this column later. I would put in a formula here later, but I would have added this additional column because I would be using it. Now let me go to the calculation tab. Here I have arranged the data and these placeholders so that I can quickly calculate and show you how to create the dashboard. I have these interactive controls highlighted in blue. So as of now I have not inserted the controls, but as a good practice I always keep all the interactive controls cell links together. So if I have a scroll bar or if I have a radio button, then all those cell links would be together. So I would show you how to use this template and calculate the summary that we would be using in the dashboard, and here we would create the dashboard. So the first thing that I would do is I would insert a bar, the bar that you saw in the final dashboard, something like this. I would insert a bar here and I would color it with this color, maybe this color. This is dark red color, and I don't really need a line here, so I would remove the line. Now here is where I would have the scroll bar. So I would go to the developer tab. If you do not have developer tab displayed in your version, simply right click on any of these ribbon tabs, go to customize the ribbon. It opens the Excel options dialog box, and here you can simply check this. It would already be there, but it would be unchecked. As soon as you check this and you click OK, you would have the developer tab displayed here in the ribbon. Now I would go to this developer tab. In insert, I would insert a scroll bar, and I click anywhere in the worksheet and it inserts a vertical scroll bar. I don't want a vertical one, I want a horizontal one. So I would just simply change the shape of it. Now this is the scroll bar. I would place it here. Let me resize it so that it looks better. Something like this. Now as of now nothing happens when I click on it, so I would have to configure this scroll bar so that it changes the weeks. I would right click and I would select format control. Here within control tab I would say the current value is 1, the minimum value again is 1, the maximum value is 12 because I have 3 months of data, so I want to get 12 weeks displayed here, 12 weeks of analysis. It gets incremented by 1 when I click on these tips. but when I click anywhere else except apart from the tips, say maybe here, then it gets incremented by 3. So this is something that I can specify here. I don't want 3 shading, so I would uncheck it, and cell link, I would click on this and I would get the cell link here in cell A2. And now when I change this scroll bar, now you can see that this value changes. As I make it say 1, it becomes 1 here. If I use it once, then it would become 2. So now it would vary from 1 to 12. Another thing that I can do here is I would insert a text box, because I need to show the user which week is selected. So I would simply go back to calculations tab, and maybe here I would create a small formula which says week number ampersand this number. So this would give me the week number, which is week number 12. I would link this text box to this week number, and now it gives me week number 12. I would right click, go to format shape, and within fill I would make it no fill. I don't need any line, but I do need to change the font color to white. And now can make some minor formatting changes, maybe increase the width a bit, increase the font size a bit. And now I have this week number 12 displayed here. And as I change the week here, okay, I also don't need this border, so I would say no line. And now when I change the week here, the week number would be displayed. Now, as I mentioned that this is something where the data or the entire dashboard is dependent on the selected week, I would have to specify from what date till what date do I need to calculate this data. So for example, if it's week 1, then I would go to this calendar and I would show you in week 1 I would start my week from 5th January. I can do it from 1st January, but then I would only have 4 days of data, and I want to have an apple to apple comparison. So what I would do is I would start my first week from 5th January and it would go up to 11th January. So here I would create a date which starts the week, and then a date that would end the week. So in this case the year would be 2015, the month would be 1, and the day here would be 5. So this is anyway the starting point, which is the starting of week 1, but I would add 7 multiplied by this number, F4 to lock it, minus 1. And the reason I have done it is because when it's 1, this gives me 5th January 2015, but when it becomes 2, this gives me 12th January 2015. So I would know that I need to pick up all the calls which starts from 12th January and end on 19th January, because that is when the week gets completed, which is 7 days from this date. Now I would use this data range and I would go back to data, and you would remember I created a new column here which is date check, and I would simply use an AND formula and I would check whether this date is greater than this date, and let me say greater than equal to, and so it will take two conditions, and the other condition is whether this date is less than this value plus 7, because now I'm checking whether the date is between this range, which is 12th January and 19th January. So now I would close and I would hit enter. This gives me false. The one thing I need to do is I need to lock D2 as I go down, and now you can see that for these days it would give me false, but when I reach say 5th January, here you would notice that it is giving me false here, but when I reach 12th January, because I've selected second week, let me go down and show you here, it starts giving me true from here, which is 12th January 2015. Now if I go back and I make this week 1, then I would go up and it would give me true when the date starts, which is 5th January starts. So here go up and it starts from here because this is where 5th January starts. So what I've done here is I could have created long formulas to configure this date range within each of these formulas, but instead I have created a helper column here in the data itself so that I can use this helper column to quickly create the summary. So for example, here now I need to calculate these call center KPIs. The first thing I need to calculate is what are the total number of calls received in this week that starts on 5th January and ends on 12th January. So to do that, I would simply create a count if formula, and I would say the range here would be, and I have a table already. Now let me go back and just for the ease of it rename this table. I would go to design, and here I would rename this table as CC data, which is call center data. Now I have renamed this table and I would use this table in my calculations. So I would say count if, my range would be CC data, and I start with square brackets. Now this is Excel table nomenclature. I already have a video on Excel table, so you can go through it and you would be really well versed with how to use Excel table nomenclatures. And here I would select date check, and this has trues and falses in it. It would be true if the date lies within this week, which is week 1 from 5th January to 12th January. So what I would do here is my condition is true. Here my range is date check, which is an array of trues and falses, and I'm saying only count those values which are true. And now when I hit enter, it gives me 432. Now let's go back to the data and verify if this is correct or not. So here I would select true and it gives me 432, and these are all the records for 5th January to 12th January. Let me check. It'll be which January to which January. It'll be 5th January to 11th January, not 12th January. So my formula is correct. Now I need to get the number of calls answered. Again, I would simply use a formula. I would say sum product, and I would be using sum product quite a lot in this dashboard and in all the dashboards because this helps in creating filters very quickly and it's easier to configure my formulas. So here I would first say CC data, and the first thing I need to do, maybe in all the formulas I'll have to do it, is check the date if it is equal to true. So this is my first condition, and my second condition here would be whether the calls are answered or not. So I would again go back to CC data, and here I would say answered is equal to Y, and I would close the bracket here. Now within sum product, you would notice that this would return an array of trues and false, and this would also return an array of trues and false. So I can simply multiply these and it would give me the result, and it gives me 359 calls that are answered in this week, which is week 1. Now I need to calculate the average speed of answer. So here I would again use sum product. First thing would be CC data, and here, as I said, we would first check the data range. So again, this would give me a range of trues and falses. Now the second thing here is, and I would use a comma here, the second thing is CC data. I would check the average speed of answer, and this would be an array of numbers and blank cells, and blank cells are treated as text by sum product. So what happens is, if I multiply this, let me show you what happens if I try and I multiply this and I hit enter, it gives me a value error. But if instead of multiply I say this is a comma, so this is a range of numbers and blank cells, and this is a range of trues and false, I would simply convert these trues and false into ones and zeros by putting the double negative sign in front of it. And now when I hit enter, it gives me the average speed of answer. Now this is not the average speed, this is the summation of all the speed of answer, or the seconds in which the calls were answered. To get the average speed, I would simply divide it by the total number of calls. And now when I hit enter, it gives me 56.55 seconds. To calculate abandon rate, I would again use the same thing, some product. First thing would be cc data, and here I need to check for the date. So quickly creating this formula, and then I need to check whether the call was answered or not. So, or maybe I simply need to do it from here because I've already created these formulas. So what I would do is the number of abandoned calls are total calls minus calls answered, and that's as simple as it. So now this gives me the total number of abandoned calls, and if I need to calculate the percentage, all I need to do is divide it by the total number of calls, and it gives me 16.9, which is the abandon rate in week 1. To calculate average call per minute, I would have to this time create a formula, or actually no, even in this case I can do it without creating a formula. I would just have total number of calls, and I would say this would be how many days do I work in a week, and these are 7 days in a week, and every day it is 9 hours, which is 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and every hour has 60 minutes. So now when I hit enter, it gives me 0.114, which is the average calls per minute, or average number of calls per minute. Now this is where I would definitely have to create a formula, which is satisfaction score. So I would create some product, and this is overall satisfaction score. So first thing that I would do is again cc data, and I would check the date here. This is equal to true, and the second thing here would be cc data satisfaction rating. Now when I hit enter, it gives me blank because there are satisfaction ratings, because this would also consist of numbers and blank cells. So I would put a comma here and a double negative here, and it gives me 1 2 3 3, but these are the satisfaction scores for these number of calls that are answered, which are 359. So I would simply divide it by 359, and it gives me 3.43 as the satisfaction score for this entire week. Now we would calculate the calls which were answered in less than 180 seconds, and with this I mean that those calls that were picked up and then they were either answered or resolved within 180 seconds, so that the agent was speaking to the person for less than 180 seconds. So to do that, again I would create some product formula. The first thing again would be cc data, and I would check the date, and this would be true. And then the second condition would be average talk duration, and here I need to check the condition whether this is less than 180 seconds or not. Now I cannot say less than 180 because 180 means a very different thing in Excel. Excel stores dates and time in a different way, where 3 minutes or 180 seconds would be a value in decimal. So to get that value, and I don't know exactly what it is, I would use the time formula, and here I would say the hour is 0. Minute here would be 3 minutes because I am looking at 180 seconds, and seconds would be 0. And now this would give me an array of trues and false based on the average talk duration. So this is my second condition, and my third condition is that the call is answered or not, because if the call is not answered, then there is actually no point in calculating this duration. So I would simply say this is equal to y. Now all these three would be a range of trues and falses. This would give me a range of trues and falses. This is a condition that would give me trues and falses, and again this is a condition that gives me a range of trues and falses. So I can use a multiplication sign because these are all the ranges are of the same size, and all have trues and falses. So now when I hit enter, it gives me 143, which means there are 143 calls which were answered in less than 180 seconds. Then there are percentage calls of less than 180 seconds. Here all I need to do is this value divided by the number of calls answered, so which comes out to be 39.8%. and then I need to calculate the number of calls with satisfaction score less than or equal to 3. So I would again create a sum product formula. The first thing is date check, so I would check the date here, which is equal to true, and the second condition here would be satisfaction score, so I would go here, satisfaction rating is less than or equal to 3, and I would also introduce another condition here, which is whether the call is answered or not. Again, this would be a range of trues and falses, and now when I hit enter, this gives me 183. So there are 183 calls which have a satisfaction score of less than 3. So these are the key KPIs that we have calculated. Again, these are the key KPIs that would go into the dashboard in various places, and we'll do that first before we jump onto agent. So let's get back to the dashboard, and here I would quickly borrow the formatting from the completed version because it will be easier for me to do that. So I would quickly copy these cells and show you how to create it. So I would copy this here and maybe align it nicely here, and these are static text. All I've done is I've inserted a box, I've colored it, given it a border, and these are text boxes. So I have total calls, average speed, average answer speed, abandon rate, and average calls per minute. These are key KPIs which are static values, but these are dynamic values, so I need to link it back to my data, and as of now this is linked to the previous dashboard that I created. I would simply go back to calculation and I would say total calls, and this becomes 432. The formatting is something that we would finalize later. The average speed of answer is this value. The abandon rate here is this value, and average calls per minute, again simply going back to calculations, average call per minute is this value. Now I don't want this in these formats, so apart from the font size and font color, I also don't want 56.5555 and this huge number. So I only want it by till one decimal place. I would go back and I would change the format here. I would press Ctrl 1 to open the format cells dialog box, and here within number I would say I only want it till one decimal place. Similarly, in this case, I don't want this huge number, I want it till say 3 decimal places, and let me do it for others as well. So satisfaction here, score here could be up to 2 decimal places, and here this could be in percentage till 1 decimal place. So I have the format fixed for all these values, and now this looks slightly better. I would select all these, and now I would change the font color, so it could be this color, and the font size, which could be somewhere like this. Now if you want, you can change the color to this if it looks better, but again, formatting is something that I would leave completely up to you. This is your dashboard and how you want to create it. The only idea is that the color theme should be something where these colors go with this theme. It should not be that this is say a orange color thing and this is green and they're not going well. The theme should go well with your dashboard so that nothing looks out of place. So now the first part of the dashboard is done. We also have other things here, which is calls answered in less than 180 seconds and satisfaction score, which would go here in the bottom right as SLA limits, but we would create that later. What I need to create here is that table I showed you where we have the sorting option and we analyze each agent separately. So to do that, I have this data placeholder, and I would create and calculate everything and show you how to sort based on those radio buttons. But first we need to create a placeholder here. So what I would do is, again, I would do a little bit of cheating. I would go and I would copy this, and I would only copy the formatting and not the values. So I would simply put it here and I would say Alt EST. If you want to copy formatting, you can go to paste special, and here, oops, I pasted it as a value. You can go to home, paste paste special, and here you can only copy the formats. The keyboard shortcut for this is Alt E S T. And now when I click OK, it gives me this. This is the format, and here I would also quickly copy these headers. Alt ESV. So now I have everything in place. One thing that I want to show you before I move forward and resize it is, whenever you create a dashboard, it's a good idea that if you have images or objects floating on your worksheet, you right click on it, go to format shape or format whatever the object is, and within properties select this option, do not move or size with cells. And this is very important because see what happens if I change the width here. This thing, say if I have not, for example, if I do this, you can see that this would shift. Week number 1 would shift here, but I don't want this to shift. I don't want any of these boxes to shift. So in this case, since I copied it, it already has that thing done, but this does not. So for example, here if I go to properties and I say do not move or size with cells, now no matter what I do with the row, with the column width, these things would remain in place. This is really helpful when you're formatting the dashboard, because if things keep on moving here and there, then it becomes difficult to align these. Now let's quickly change the column width so that it looks slightly better. And again, I'll not spend a lot of time in formatting. I would simply show you how to create these things, rather than showing you everything from scratch. I would simply show you how to get to that level. Now this looks quite okay. Let me go back to calculation. Let me also insert a row here because it will give me space to have the radio buttons. Now I go back to calculation, and here I need to have agent names. I do not have the names here, so what I'll do is quickly here from this data, I would copy all these agents' name, come here to any empty space in your worksheet, and I would simply paste it. Now I would remove duplicates, and the shortcut is Alt A M, and here it would open the remove duplicates dialog box. It says my data has headers, which is not the case, so I would uncheck it, and it says column M, and when I click OK, it removes 4992 duplicate values and only 8 unique values remain. So in this call center there are 8 people that are working, and I would copy these names here, so I would paste it as values, Alt E S V, and now when I click OK, I have these names here. Now I need to get the number of calls attended by each agent. So what I would do is I would simply copy this formula. I can do it, but maybe I would create a sum product formula. Oops. So I would create a sum product formula. The reason I'm not copying this formula is because it had only one condition, which is the date range, but here I would have 2 conditions, so I would rather use sum product. You can also use countifs, and you can try many variations of these formulas. I would stick to countif because it's consistent in my dashboard. I've been using it. And the first thing here would be cc date check, and the date check here is this, should be equal to true. And the second condition here would be that the agent name should be Diane. So to do that, I would again go back to cc data agent, and should be equal to this name. And now I would press it thrice so that A is logged, the column is logged, but when I go down the row, this value would change from Diane to Becky to Stewart. And now when I click enter, it gives me 54. And now when I double click, it gives me the number of all these calls taken by these agents. Now again, a good idea of data triangulation to see whether your dashboard is right or not is simply select all these and see the sum here, which is 432. And this is also the case with total number of calls. So my data is right here. Again, to get the calls answered, I would copy this formula and simply add another condition to it, which would be cc data answered, and this would be equal to y. And now when I hit enter, I think I missed out on this part, so now this would work. let me recreate it again. There is some stupid issue here. So it's CC data answered is equal to y. Okay, the problem here is that I did not remove this bracket. Now it'll work perfectly. And now when I hit enter, it gives me the total number of calls answered, which is 43 for Diane. If I double click, it would give me all these numbers. Again, go back here and check the sum, which is 359, which means my data is working fine. To get the average speed of calls, average speed of answer, I would again simply use this formula, and I would say I'm checking the date, which is right. I'm checking for the agent. I'm checking whether the call was answered or not. And here I would also use CC data speed of answer, and I need to calculate the average speed of answer, so I would have to divide it by the total number of calls. But before that, let's see what happens when I enter this. It gives me a value error, again for the reason because speed of answer would have numbers, which is values in seconds, as well as blanks. So if I have that thing, I would have to put a comma here, and maybe I would want to put a double negative here. And let's see what happens if I remove the double negative. It would still work, so this is fine. And now I would divide it by the total number of calls, because that is the average speed of answer. And when I click enter, when I hit enter, it gives me the average speed by each of these agents. Here I have call resolution percentage, which means how many calls were resolved. So first I would have to calculate that number. That number would again be, let me simply copy this formula instead of creating a whole new formula. That would be faster. So the date is checked, the agent is checked, and now I need to see whether the call was resolved or not. So I would use CC data, and here I would say resolved, and again this would be Y or N. And now when I hit enter, 40 calls were resolved, and there were total of 54 calls. So I would simply divide it by the total number of calls, and it gives me the call resolution percentage. And now this is the call resolved number, which could simply be used by using, I can get it by using this simple formula, which is this one. So it's 40 for Diane, 31 for Becky, and all these numbers. Now I have these values in place, and I can put it here in this thing, but I also want the functionality to sort this data whenever there is a radio button that is clicked here. So let's first do one thing. Let's insert the radio buttons. So I would go to insert, I would go to radio button, and I would click here, and it inserts this radio button. I don't need these descriptions here because I just want to show a simple radio button. So what I'll do is I would remove that, and I would place that radio button here. Again, you may have to align it many times while you're creating this dashboard, but that's okay. That's the easier part. And I would align these here, these four. Now you would remember I told you that in total calls and calls answered and call resolution, we would need this to be in descending order, which means that the top value should be the highest number, and then it goes down and the number decreases. But in average speed of answer, I want the minimum value, the lowest value at the top, and then it increases as I go down. So we'll see how we can use it, but the first thing is we need to configure this radio button. So I would go to format control, and I don't want it, I would have to keep one checked. So maybe say total calls would be checked, and the cell link here would be this cell. And now when I click OK, this is checked. Now see what happens when I click calls answered. This becomes 2. So what is happening is this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. When I click on average speed of answer, it becomes 3. So now I would use this number to sort these values based on what the user has selected. So for example, here if I have selected total calls, then I would use this number 1 to get a sorted list of agents based on total calls. So to do that, let me start here. Let me type sorting here, because here is where I would start the process of sorting these based on what we have selected. The first thing that I would do here is I would use an index formula, and I would use this as the array, these four, and I would lock it, and the row number here would be rows G16 is to G16, and I would lock the first one. The idea is that this would be row number 1. If I select this, there is one row between G16 to G16, but when it goes down it would become G16 to G17, so this value would become 2. As of now, if I select this and press F9, it is 1, and the column number here would be this value, which is the sorting control. And the first one is for total calls, second is for calls answered, third is for average speed of answer, and fourth is for call resolution percentage. So now I would lock this as well, and now when I hit enter, it gives me 54, because this is 1, which indicates total calls, and this is the first value. And I would double click on this. Okay, I would have to drag it because this column is empty, and now I have this. But what if I make this 2? See what happens. These numbers now become these numbers, which is called answered. If I make it 3, then these are the average speed of answer numbers. So what I've done is I have made this data dependent on what I've selected here. Now to start sorting, the first thing I would do here is I would make all these entries unique. So for example, in this case, there is no repetition. So for example, there is 53 and 53. So for example, if I select 2 here, you would see that I have 53 twice. If I sort this, then these two would be at the same level, and I don't want this, because eventually I would have to pull the agent name based on this. If it's 53, then every time it would only pull Stewart's name. So what I would do is I would make these unique, and to do that I would select this, and I would add a very small number. And first I would add the rows formula, so when it goes down it becomes 1. It's 1 now, and when it goes down it becomes 2, 3, 4, and so on. And I would divide this by a huge number, and now when I hit enter, this gives me 43.000001, and now I would drag it down. So what happens is now these two numbers have become unique. This is 53.000003 and this is 006. So these two have now become unique, and these would have their separate ranks. Now what I would do here is I would first check the condition whether this value, and I would hit F4, is equal to 3. The reason being that I can sort it based on the values in an ascending order or a descending order, but I want average speed to be in ascending order and rest 3 in descending order. So what I would do is I would check whether this is 3. If this is 3, then I would use the small formula, and I would say this is my array, sort it in an ascending order. So I would use rows formula again, so that when it goes down it becomes 1, 2, 3, and so on. And now this is done. This is if this is equal to 3. If this value is equal to 3, then this value is returned, else I use the large formula. And again the same thing, this is my array, and again the rows formula to get 1, 2, 3, and so on when I go down the row. Now when I hit enter, it gives me 53.00000600, because here it's 2, so it's giving me the largest value of this lot. And when I drag it down, it gives me all these numbers. But see what happens. As of now it's in a descending order, so I have 53.0006 here and 003 here. But what happens when I make it 3? It's not the large formula but the small formula that kicks in, and it gives me these numbers in an ascending order. So this is how I would click on the radio button, then sort it based on whether it's these 3 or whether it's average speed of answer. Now when I have this number, I would have to find out its position. So I would look up this value J16 in this array, and I would lock this, and I would simply say give me the value of this number in this array. And now when I double click, it gives me all these values, the positions of these number. And what I simply need to do is use this position. So let me drag it down. I would use this position to get the name. So this is my array and my position is this, and I would hit enter, and this gives me Becky, because Becky has the best average speed of answer. I've selected 3 here, and Becky has the best speed of answer, followed by Diane. If you look at the data here, let me simplify it and let me make it 1. Now it gives me Stewart at the top because Stewart has the maximum number of calls, total number of calls received. And after Stewart I have Joe, which has the number at 63. So this is how I can get a sorted list of agents' name based on what you have selected. The reason I had to do this entire thing is because if I would not do this, then in case there are repetitions, it would not show me the right result here. So I had to make these values unique and then had to sort it. Now things would be easier. All I need to do is, let me go back to the dashboard and copy these, and I just need to pull out these values. So this is agent name, and I need to pull out these values. Now to get the values, I would use index formula. My array would be this range of cells, these 4 columns. I would hit F4 to lock it. My row number would be dependent on the name here. So in this case, if it's Stewart, I would want to pull the data for Stewart. So to do that, I would use the match formula. This becomes my lookup value, and this becomes my lookup array. I would hit F4 to lock it, and even in this case, I would place the $ in front of L so that when I go to the right, this does not change. And now I would say 0 because I'm looking for an exact match. If I select this entire part and press F9, it gives me 3 because Stewart is at the 3rd position. Let me Control Z and go back. And finally, I have the column number, and I can simply hard code this column number, or I can use columns formula and then it'll get incremented as I go to the right. Anything is fine because I do not have a lot of data in this case. And now when I go to the right, you can see that total calls have been sorted based on this number, and we have the right agent name here. Now all I need to do is simply copy this formula here and change the column number to 2, or let me simply use the columns formula because it will be faster. I would say L16 is to L16, and I would lock the first column here, and now I would double click, and then I can simply drag it, and this gives me all the right values. So you can see that now if I go to the top and I make it 3, the value changes here based on the average speed of answer. So I have this data here. Now all I need to do is I need to put this data in the dashboard. To do that, I would simply say this is equal to this value here, and I would drag it to the down, drag it to the right 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can see in call resolution I have 2 columns. The reason being that I would insert a conditional formatting to show you some icons. Now I can format these quickly. Press Control 1. In number, I would say I only want 1 decimal place. In call resolution, I want it in percentage with 1 decimal place, and maybe I can align them to the center. So I have these in the middle. Now see what happens when I click on it. The agent name changes, total calls are sorted, we have the agent name based on these total calls, and all these other data points also change. Similar is the case with this. You can also try and do it with average speed of answer, and it will give you the right result. And see what happens. Here I have Diane, Martha, and Dan, and these are closely at the same level, and quite possible that they are at the same level, but it would still give me the right agent name because I created unique values here. So that's the case. And then I have the call resolution. Here I would simply refer to this value, and based on the data I have conditional formatting applied here because I copy pasted it from the dashboard. But in case I have nothing, let me show you how to do this from scratch. I would refer to this cell, and here I would go to home, conditional formatting, new rule, and within new rule I would select icon sets, and I decided to use these icon sets, but you can choose any of these you want. And I would make this as number, and I would say if this value is less than 0.7, which means that if it is less than 70%, show me red. If it is less than 80% and above 70%, show me amber or yellow, and if it is more than 80%, show me green. And now when I hit OK, and one more thing is you can say I want to only show icons. Now when I hit OK, you can see that I have these numbers here. You can change the font size so that it looks a bit better, maybe align it here, align it to the center if you can, or maybe to the left, because then it looks slightly better. And what I've also done is, in this case, what I've done is I want it to be shown as a single cell. I don't want this to be shown as two cells, so I would have to change the border. First of all, I would apply border to it, not this color but maybe a light color border. So I'm going to go here, line color, and maybe this color. I would select this entire table and give that border, and here I would separately select this, press Ctrl 1, and here in border I would say I don't want this on the right because I don't want this one. I want the entire border but not the right one, so I would simply deselect it. And now when I hit OK, you can see that it looks like a single cell. I can change the size here so that it looks marginally better, and maybe I can align these numbers a bit to the right. So I would again press Ctrl 1, go to alignment, and here instead of center I would say right but with 2 indent, and when I click OK, it comes like this, which looks much better. So this is how you can use conditional formatting. If you click on it, you would see that these numbers which have these green icons come at the top because you have sorted it based on this. Now we need to calculate the call resolution trend by the number of days. So in this case I have these days here. Let me add Sunday as well because the call center is open on Sunday as well. And what I need to do here is I have these same agent names. I would use this name, the sorted name here, so that when Joe is at the top, it should be there in my trend as well. So if Joe and Jim are at the top, then it would also be here. If I change the sorting order, if I change this, then this value would also change. Now to get the number of calls resolved by each agent, I would again create a formula. So I would use sum product, and the first thing I would check would be CC data, and here the first thing I would check would be, is the date equal to this date, and I would lock this. So now it would check for Joe whether the date here is equal to T2 or not, and then I would add another condition to it. So let me put it in round brackets, and now I would add another condition to it, which would be the agent name should be Joe. So I would again go to CC data, agent is equal to this name, and I would press F4 thrice so that my column is locked. And the third condition would be that CC data, the call is resolved, so I would have to say Y. Now when I hit enter, you would see that this does not work. The reason here being that in this case this value D2 here is an integer. For example, if I select Control 1, I press Control 1 and show you the number, it is 42009.00. But if I go back to my original data, here these are not integers, these also have a time value to it. So for example, if I select say this cell and I press Control 1, you would see that in number this is 42005.38, because that 0.38 would indicate the time during the day. So if I want to get an answer here, I would have to use the integer formula, and I would say the integer part of this is equal to D2. Now when I hit enter, it gives me the result, which is 10. 10 is the number of calls attended by Joe on Monday. Now another thing here is, if I say this is equal to D2, when I go to Tuesday it should become D2 plus 1. When I go to Wednesday it should become D2 plus 2. So to do that I would simply modify this part and I would say this is D2 plus columns, and I'm using columns because it gets incremented when you go to the right. Check columns, this cell colon this cell, and I would lock A33, and then I would also subtract 1 from it, because in the first case I do not want to add 1. This equal to D2 is just fine, but when I add columns it adds 1 to it, so I would subtract 1. Now when I go to the right, this would become 2, and then when I subtract 1 this would become D2 plus 1, and that is exactly what I want. So now when I hit enter and I double click on it, this gives me the values, but when I go to the right it gives me value error. I've probably not logged one of the cells which should be. The reason here being that here I have data and here it becomes agent, so I can simply copy this and paste it as formula. So I would press Ctrl Alt E S F, and now when I click OK, it gives me the right result. So now again another way to check whether this is right or not is I would simply select all the data for Joe and see it's 53. I would go and cross check, this is 63. So let me check again. This gives me 53 for Joe, which is called resolved, and here it is 53. So this is right. My formula is working just fine. Now I would use this data to get a trend here, and to do that I would use spark lines. I would go to insert, and within insert I would use a line, and the data range here, the location range is already selected. The data range here would be this range, and now when I click OK, you can see that I have these spark lines. These are the trend for each day by that agent. So for Joe, these are the trends on from Monday to Sunday. I can also design a little bit in my spark lines. So what I would do is I would say the negative. So there are no negative points, but maybe high points should be highlighted. And when I do this, it highlights the high points. Similarly, you can also highlight the low points if you want. So this is how you can have the agent level information in the dashboard. When you click on it, you would see that these numbers and everything here would change along with the trend because these name change. Now another thing that I want to get here is the abandon rate by the product, which is washing machine or television or air conditioner. So to do that, here I have this table, and let me first create this table and then we'll go to the satisfaction part. The simple thing here is, again, I would copy paste the formulas. So what I would do here is I would copy this formula here in washing machine, and I would say the date should be equal to true, which means that it should be in the date range, and instead of agent I would say it should be department, and it should be equal to this here, and I would press F4 thrice to lock it when I go to the right. And now when I close the bracket and hit enter, it gives me 75. I can double click to get all these numbers. Again, a quick way to cross check is select all these. It says 432, which is the total number of calls received. So I have a different categorization, but it all adds up to the total number of calls. Now here I need to have calls answered. I would simply copy this formula, paste it here, and instead of having, or I'll have to add another condition. So I would add cc data, and here I would say answered is equal to y. Now when I hit enter, it gives me the number of calls answered in each of these product lines or departments. The number of abandoned call percentage would be the total number of abandoned calls, which would be this minus this, and let me put it in bracket, divided by the total number of calls. So in this case it's 13%. I would convert these into percentages by pressing Ctrl 1, and here in format cells I would make it to percentage with 1 decimal place. The SLA limit is something that is decided by the client, and in this case the SLA limit is 20%. So what I would do is I would simply type 20% here for all these, and here I need to check whether the SLA limit has been breached in that week. And to do that, if the SLA limit is this, I would simply use a formula, if this value here is greater than this value, which is 20%, then show me this value, else show me not available. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to show the abandon rate for all these departments, but I also want to highlight the rates, the departments where the abandon rate is more than the SLA limit. So I would use these two series to plot in my chart. Now when I hit enter, it gives me not available, and when I double click on it, only this cell 22.1 is the one where the SLA limit has been breached. Now I would use this to create the chart. Now let me create the chart right here in front of you with this data, and then we can copy paste the chart later. I would use this chart, and I know the data is not right here, so what I would do is I would delete these data points, all these data points here, because this is not how I want to plot this chart. The first thing that I want to plot on this chart is abandon rate, and I would click here and paste it. So this gives me abandon rate. I want to change this axis, the horizontal axis. I would go to design, select data, and here in horizontal category axis labels I would select these departments, and now it shows washing machine and everything. I will click OK. Now what I need to also do here is I want to add another series that would get highlighted in red when there is an SLA breach. So I would copy this and I would paste it here, and instead of having it as a separate thing here, I would say change series chart type and put this on secondary axis. And now as soon as I do this, you can see that it overlaps with this, and I can change the color to a red color, and it's done. The other thing is I want to show this limit, SLA limit, as well. Now since it's a static limit, you can simply have a line. If you don't want that, you can also do this. You can have another series added, right click, go to change series chart type, and change the chart type to a line, and you would have this line. Maybe you don't want it with marker, just have a line like this, and you would have this value at 20%. Then you can change the format a bit. So for example, in this case, I may not like the line color, I may want it light gray or maybe red because it's the target, and I don't want it to be so thick, so I would reduce the width, and maybe dash type, so I would make it this. And then a little bit of formatting would make your chart look really good. Control Z. I would delete the grid lines, I would delete the secondary axis because these are exactly the same, and maybe I can also change the color here. In my original chart I've used green color because that goes well with the theme, but here I can have any color you want that goes well with your theme would work here. I would also change the border color to maybe dark green. And you may not want to have this series here because it's kind of self-explanatory, because you would also have a title, a chart title at the top, so I'm not keeping this here. But if you want, you can also keep the legend in place, and all you need to do right now here is maybe add data labels if you want, and copy this and paste it in the dashboard. So it's here, right here. You can align it with this table and maybe align it with these boxes above. So now you have everything in place. Maybe change this a bit so that you can have your title at the top. And now see what happens when I change the week. See what happens when I make it say week 8. This would automatically update and it will show you these bars in red where the SLA limit has been breached. If you want, you can also change this so that you do not have it spaced as 5. Maybe you would want the major axis at 10%, so you can do that as well. So this is how you can create this chart. Now let me show you how to work with the satisfaction part of this dashboard. So I would delete this chart here, and I would start with the agent name. Now again, I would link the agent name here to these names, because I also want the satisfaction level to change when you select total calls or calls answered or average speed of answer. Then that these names would also change. Now I need to calculate the satisfaction score for each agent. So what I would do is I would go back to the satisfaction overall score. I would copy this and I would paste it here and modify the formula. The first thing is I would check for uh, the date, so this is true, and then I would have to check for the satisfaction rating. Now another angle that I would have to add here would be I need to also check for whether this is the same agent name or not. So for example, here I would say CC data agent name, agent would be equal to Joe, and I would lock this, press F4 thrice, so lock it so that when I go down it changes but not to the right. And now when I hit enter, and let me close the parenthesis, now when I hit enter it gives me 137 as the score, but this is the total score. I need to also divide it by the total number of calls answered by Joe. So I have these numbers here in the sorted data, and I would use this cell, and now this gives me the right value, which is 3.341, and a huge number, and I can use this for all these agents. Now what happens here is that if I change this, say for example if I sort it by total calls, these names would change, and based on these names this entire formula would change because it is hinged upon the agent's name. And this value, which is N16, would also change because this also gets sorted. So now this would be the right way of doing it. All I need to do is just mention the target and see whether it exceeds the target or not. Here my target is 3.5, so I would keep this target. Now if you remember, in the original dashboard I created a bar chart and it also had smileys. So let me first create that bar chart here in front of you, and then I can copy paste this data there. I would use this cluster bar chart. I don't need these data points, so I would delete it. I rather need these data points, and I would paste it here. And now I have these data points. This is in a reverse order because the 8th data point, which is for Stewart, comes at the top, but I don't need this. So what I would do here is I would right click, go to format axis, and I would say category in reverse order. So now it is in the right order. I would go to design, select data, and I would change these labels. So instead of 1 2 3, it will show me Dan, Jim, and all these names. Another thing is I maybe don't need this, so I would delete it, or I can keep it at the bottom. So what I would do is I would first say the minimum should be 0, and the vertical axis crosses maximum. Oops, and I need to say here in labels I would say this should be high, and when I say high it goes down. So now I have this chart ready, almost ready. What I also need to show here is I need to show a target line, and to do that what I would do is I would also plot this target line here, and I would right click, go to format series, and I would say the gap width should be, oops, not the gap width, series overlap should be high, so that there is 100% series overlap. But here I would make the color as transparent, so I would say this should be no fill, and I would go to design, and here I would add an element which would be a trend line, and I would say add a linear trend line. And when I add a linear trend line, it would show you something like this. Now it already has a transparent color, so it would not show up, but this trend line shows up. And now when you change this order, so for example if you go back to the dashboard and do it by calls answered, this would automatically update. Let me change this a little bit, maybe reduce gap width so that it looks a bit better, and fill it with light blue color with a solid blue border. So here maybe I can use this border. Now I have this ready. Oops, I by mistake did it for the other axis. I need to do it for this axis. So I would go to fill, the color would be this color and the border would be this color. And now it looks marginally better. You can change the color of the trend line and you can make it red. So now it looks good, and if you change these, this chart would automatically update. Now that's all fine, but I still need to get those smileys here. So to get those smileys, I would use a different technique. What I would do here is, instead of using this as these labels, I would use something different. I would first have that smiley in place. So go to insert, symbols, and within symbols in Arial, if you scroll down, you would see that you have this smiling face, and when you click insert, it inserts this smiling face. Now all I would do here is I would check if this value is more than the target value, and if it is true, then I would use, oops, I don't need to have a quotation mark. I would simply refer to this cell, ampersand, space, ampersand, this name, else simply this name. And when I click enter, it gives me Dan along with that smiley. And now when I drag it down, it'll give me all those names that have the value more than this value. Let me simply lock this cell, which is A52. So I would press F4, and now when I double click here, you can see that it gives me a smile in front of these four faces, because these are the four that have exceeded the satisfaction score. Now I would go here in design, select data, and I would replace this data with this data, and you can see that now I have these smileys coming up. I can simply copy this chart and paste it here, and then I can resize it just so that it looks better here. Maybe I can place it here. So you can see that now when you change the total number of calls, these agents would get shuffled, and at the same time, if you change the week number, this would also update, and whenever it achieves the target, then there would be a smiley in front of that face. Now I also need to have a satisfaction chart here, a gauge chart where it would point to the satisfaction score. Now to create that chart, I have this space empty here, and what I would do is I would have to create two pie charts. The first pie chart would be the background. If I take you back to the original dashboard, you can see that this is a combination of two pie charts. One is the pie chart that shows you these results, and one is the pie chart that has this line here. So now I would come back here. So first I would create the background chart, which is this chart where I have this red, yellow and green, so that I have this entire donut chart, and then I would create this gauge line. So to do that, the first thing that I want to do here is I want to have those numbers in place. I would have 50, 20, 30 and 100, and I'll show you why I'm picking up these numbers, but the idea is that the total here is 200, and I would plot it in a donut chart. So I would go and I select donut chart. Let me delete the chart title and this here. When I select the donut chart and I select this entire donut chart, it would also ask me the angle, and I can simply, when I change this, see what happens. This donut chart would move. So what I would do is I would put 270 here, and when I do that, this entire yellow part comes here, and these three parts go to the top. Let me close this. Now what I need to do is I would simply change the color of this to transparent, and I would say I don't need a fill here. I need a fill in this part, which should be red, something like this. This should be, say, orange, and this one should be green. So what I've done here is, in this chart I have these four numbers. This is 50, this is 20, this is 30, and the bottom one is 100. So I've created a gauge chart and I needed an equal amount at in below here, so that's why I've had 100 here. Now when I have this chart in place, I need to create another chart that I would superimpose on this, which would be the needle. So to create the needle, it should be dependent on the overall satisfaction score that I'm trying to show here. So to do that, first let's see that the satisfaction score varies from 1 to 5, and it would vary from here to here, which means that if the satisfaction score is say 3, it should come here. Based on this chart, that value should ranges from 0 to 60, 60 to 80, and 80 to 100. So now I would simply use this value and I would multiply this by 20. So now this becomes it would vary from 0 to 100, and then I would subtract 2 from it, and here I would put that 2. The reason I'm subtracting 2 from here is because this 2 would make the needle, and now I would simply say 200 minus this minus this, and now this gives me 131. The idea here is that I would create a chart, a pie chart, using these values, and see what happens when I create a pie chart. This is what happens. I get a needle here. I don't, let me delete this, I also want this chart to give me the right angle, so again I would put 270 here, 270 here, and now it gives me the right chart. I've tilted it by 270. I would simply make the color of this as no fill, this as no fill, and maybe this I can change the color to somewhere like a blue line. And now see what happens when I change this score. So for example, if I come here and I change this weak number, I make it 7, this moves based on this value. And all I need to do here is, first of all, make the chart background no fill, so that now I can align them properly. I would align these two charts properly. Another way of doing this alignment is simply using the format tool. So I would select these two charts, go here, align it to the top, align it to the right, and now this part is ready. I can simply select these and put it here. So for example, let me paste this part here and let me copy these individually and put it here. So I would delete this. Let me not paste it here. Yeah, so I'd go back here, I would select these two charts, copy it, come back to the dashboard and paste it here. Now I have these two charts. I can simply align them together. So I can align these two charts together, and now it would start working perfectly. I can move it to the right. I can maybe squeeze it a bit so that it fits perfectly here. And if you want, you can play around with the formatting a little bit. Let me send it to the back so that I can change these pies here. Maybe I want to change the donut explosion. So if I, not the donut explosion, maybe the whole size. I want to reduce the whole size so that it looks a bit better here. And now I can just send it to the back. Right click here, send it to the back, and now it's here. All you need to do is now have these charts in place, align them with other stuff here, maybe align them with this chart and reduce the chart, this chart's width, align these charts together along with the lower one, and then have a satisfaction score text box here. So I'd go to insert and go to text box, and I would insert a text box here. This would say satisfaction score, and another text box here that would be linked to the score from the calculation sheet. So here I would simply link it to the overall satisfaction score here. Now I can format it. I can say no fill, no line, but the format here would be say blue color, dark blue color with higher font, and satisfaction score again could be no fill, no line, but maybe italics. Go here and make it italics. So this is something that you can play around with. These are simple formatting things, but the idea is that now you have a donut chart that would work as a gauge chart and show you what the satisfaction score is. Now this seems a bit complicated in creating, but this looks really nice on your dashboard. So for example, here if I have this chart and I change the week, you would see that this value and these numbers would automatically change, and this looks pretty on your dashboard. You can see that these gauge, this line is changing, so this looks good on your chart. Now majority of the work for this dashboard is done. The part that is left is the small thing here, which were the service level agreement, and that is really easy to create. I would simply go here, insert a box, try that the box is of the same size, maybe say no fill, and a light gray color with less width, and I can also insert another bar here at the top which can say SLA limits. Simply align it to the middle, to the center, increase the font a bit, select it, increase the font, and maybe make it bold. It's already in white color, so it looks a little better. And then all I need to do here is I would simply insert text box. So I would go here, text box, and I need to insert 4 text box here. One here that would check for this thing, calls answered in less than 180 seconds. So I would simply paste it here and I would say calls answered in less than 180 seconds, and again change the format a bit here, make it say 18, change the color if you want, change the format and anything that you want to do here, and simply have it here. Again have another one which would say calls with satisfaction score less than 3, and here I have these 2 statements. I would have the numbers in the calculation tab, so all I need to do is link it. I would go and I say no line, I don't want any line here. Simply copy paste, so I would press Ctrl D to duplicate. I don't want this text inside it. I would remove this, go to formula bar, equal to, and number of calls less than 180 seconds is 124. Similarly I would come here and again link it to the calculation tab here. Satisfaction less than equal to 3 is 151, so I can say less than equal to 3. And now all I need to do is I have these tabs here, align them, reduce their size, change the format, maybe have a blue color, huge font size, bold, maybe change this color, and then since this is a good thing I would want this to be in green color, so I would make it green. But this is not a good thing. There are 151 calls where the satisfaction score has been less than 3, so this is not a good thing. Now this is something that I've quickly done here without much formatting, but you can make it look really pretty if you want. If you have any more SLA limits that you think can be added here, then that can be added. Again, as I mentioned, this is completely dynamic, which means that if you change the week number, then these numbers would automatically change. So let me quickly show that to you. not spend more time on formatting because I've already done it in the finalized version of the dashboard. And see what happens when I change the week number. It's 119, but when I change it to 8 it becomes 124 because these numbers are tagged to these cells here in the backend. So now this is how you can create an end-to-end customer call center performance dashboard, and these are different elements in this dashboard. I've showed you many different techniques. There are simple ways where you can simply highlight KPIs. There are radio buttons that you can use to sort the data. There is the spark lines. Then you have this chart where you can have those data points highlighted in a different color that reach the target or breach the target. We have this chart here where we have displayed the names with a smiley because they have met the target. We have this gauge chart here, so that this is what we call a speedometer chart or a gauge chart, where you have this line that would indicate the overall satisfaction score. And then we have a simple SLA limit thing here where you can see what are the key KPIs and whether the client's SLA limits were breached or not. So this is how you can create an end-to-end call center performance dashboard. I hope you liked this video. Thank you and have a nice day.